And remarkably, right in this area, we have nettle. I love nettle, but most herbalists, it's not really all that surprising, huh? So most herbalists love nettle. So we can see, who is from this area? Is this Urtica dioica? Okay. So a couple things about this. It's late in the fall, so you can see some of the pricklies, but it's not really super prickly. And I've noticed that later in the year, I don't know whether there's some people brushing up and animals going past it, but it loses some of its prickle. It's usually stingier earlier on. But how many people use fresh nettle like to sting themselves with? Okay. This is not really that bad. One time I was doing a class like this and it was really mild, and so I started like, you know, people are like, I can't believe you just did that. Like, no, I'm morbidly fascinated by nettle sting, but I wouldn't necessarily sting myself in the face with it. If I thought it was bad. Sometimes you have creeper sting though, so if I start going like, I might be getting it. There's so many different ways to use nettle, right? So nettle, number one, is an awesome food. It tastes really good. And if you wanted to eat fresh nettle, one of the things you can do is you can just roll up a leaf so that all the stingies are on the inside. And then kind of crush it up to bruise it, because the juice of the nettle will neutralize its own sting. And then just eat it. So you can sit down and just eat leaf after leaf after leaf. Should I pass this around? Okay, the non-afraid of nettle sting people can do that. Feel free to sting yourself with it.
Nettle the same all over the country?
There's different species of nettle, but this looks the same as my nettle.
In Oklahoma, you touch one of those and you're on fire.
Yeah, morbid fascination with it, right?
Oh.
In Michigan, like on agricultural land has the best nettle, you know, like, so lots of farm animals pooping and peeing everywhere, that's going to be really good nettle. So when you sting yourself with it, it acts as like a counter irritant, and it stimulates circulation into the area. And just like bee stings, it has formic acid. And just like bee stings are known to help with certain inflammatory and autoimmune and neurological conditions, nettle can help with that too. So you could do like nettle sting therapy, you know, rather than bees. And it's reproducible. You don't have to go and find a bee that stings you and then dies. You can just keep going to your nettle patch and stinging yourself with it. I've used it for tendinitis, okay? So, you know, tendinitis is on the rise because everyone's like click, 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 click. And it's a repetitive stress injury. So I used to get tendinitis from playing guitar too much when I was a teenager. And then now I type too much, and so I don't even type very good, but I click too much. And I was like, oh, my tendinitis is hurting me. And normally I would use Salomon seal for this, but I'm thinking like, yeah, but I know the Salomon seal works, and I'm an herbalist, and we're kind of a weird lot. So I'm going to wait, and I'm going to try something different on it, right? And then I thought, you know, the people who come to see me never come to see me right when their wrist starts hurting. They come to see me like after it's been hurting for like 3 or 4 months. So I'm going to wait 3 or 4 months and not do anything about it. So I did that, and I was like, wow, my wrist hurts pretty much all the time now. And so what I did is I would go out, you know, to the ditch by my house, and I would sting my wrist with nettle. And I did that for 3 days, in the morning and the evening, and I took like small doses of Salomon seal just for those 3 days. And then boom, it was just totally went away and never came back. And I've had some success with clients that have agreed to do this, and I haven't had any success with the clients who are like, you want me to do what? So it takes a certain type, you know? And there's also the thing too where you're like, I'm pretty confident that if you do this, it'll work, but I'm really curious about this, and I don't know if it'll work, but will you try it? Because they usually want to go with the thing that you feel confident about. So stinging with it is actually can be very helpful. Some people will get raised hives from it, but they're not dangerous, right? Some people just can't stand it. They'll be like, yeah, and they get freaked out about it, and those people it's probably not good for. But it's not really going to hurt anyone. Of course, eating it, it's super nutritious. It's high in iron. It helps with iron. It has protein in it, so it's one of our good protein tonics for people that don't eat meat and they want a good green source of protein. And what could be better than something that has protein and is green? You don't have to be a vegetarian to just totally adore that this has protein in it. You can cook it, it loses its sting. You can roll it up and eat it raw. Where I'm at, I always mix it with other stuff. So like if it's growing next to a garden, I might grab some like garlic chives, or where I live, we have garlic mustard. So in the springtime, I'll like wrap up two nettle leaves and some garlic mustard leaves. And then I'll have like, it's spiced. Or in the summertime, we have a field pepperweed. Do you guys have that? Lepidium species? They got this really sweet, spicy, tangy flavor to them. I'll wrap those up in the leaves and munch on those. You can replace spinach in recipes, make lasagna with it. Rosemary Gladstar makes the best nettle spanakopita ever.
No, my wife does.
Yeah. You're married to Rosemary? No. Okay. So eating is really good. Strong infusion. So take a big handful. Some people say like an ounce, but just take a big handful of leaves and put it in a quart jar and pour boiling water over it and let it steep overnight or for like 4 to 8 hours, and then you can strain it out and drink that. If you are kind of constitutionally dry and all the peeing, right, makes you feel more dry, you could add other stuff in. So a lot of people say like, oh, I like to add marshmallow root to that, or I like to add licorice root to that. But flavor-wise, to me, yeah. But nettle and violet leaf, really good together. And if you're more on the dry end, you could add just more violet leaf to it. But the flavors blend together really nice. And then you can also use tincture of fresh nettle, okay? And that can be good for like the hay fever allergy spectrum that people will say like, oh, you should use freeze-dried nettle for that. But the thing that I like to use it for is people who are like stuck in sympathetic nervous system state all the time. So they're jumpy and twitchy, and they're always parasympathetic and sympathetic, parts of the autonomic nervous system. So we might say, just for a mnemonic device, parasympathetic is peaceful. It's like rest and digest. Your energy is kind of turned inward. And sympathetic is like stress. Something happened, you're like this. We'll often say that sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight, but usually there's like alert stage before you get to fight or flight. So you're sitting in your room at night and you're reading something, you hear like a bang on your window, and you think like, oh my God, it could be a wookalar. And everyone knows what a wookalar is, of course. It could be a wookalar, okay? So that's like alert. And if you look out your window and you see the wookalar, then you have to decide whether you're going to fight it or you're going to flee, or maybe freak out, wookalar, or just freeze and be like, I can't do anything, right? So that would be like stages of sympathetics, but tons of people are stuck in alert stage, okay? They're nervous, they're anxious, they're jumpy, they're very reactive to stuff. And when you're in that state, your digestive system and your metabolism is deficient, your immune system is deficient, you are tired but you don't sleep well, and that state persists for a long time, and then you start to sort of oscillate between like nervous exhaustion, oh, I'm so tired, but I can't sleep. I have insomnia and I'm restless when I lay down. And nervous agitation, like I have so much to do, but I can't focus and actually get anything done. So you start something and then you think like, oh, but I need to do this. And oh, wait, but and I was doing that, and you can't actually get one thing done. So after you've been in that state for a while, you're just kind of a wreck, right? Maybe you start to like, when you're in nervous exhaustion, you drink lots of coffee. And when you're in nervous anxiety, maybe you drink beer, maybe you smoke pot or whatever it does that you particularly do to take the edge off of it. You start to sort of self-medicate your extremes, and what you're trying to do is bring yourself towards a balance, but what you're really doing is pushing your extremes farther apart. Nettle tincture, fresh nettle tincture, if you use that over a period of time, I found that it helps people sort of shift back into being in parasympathetic nervous system more naturally, more consistently, and that it's helpful with that. It's not a quick fix. It's not something like taking anemone tincture where you're having a freak out panic attack and you take anemone tincture and all of a sudden it helps to shift you. Paul Bergner calls those autonomic switchers. And that guy there, Seven Song, has a great article on his website about using anemone for panic attacks. At least I called you the right name. This is more like a prolonged thing over a period of time. It's not an acute situation. It's like chronic anxiety. And you can use nettle alone for that, and it's helpful. But if you mix fresh nettle tincture with fresh milky oats tincture, ooh, that's really nice. Long-term strategy, and then as you start to feel better, the important thing that you do is you start to make changes in your life. Like you can't just take the herbs and be like, oh, I started taking this and all of a sudden I'm better. You have to take sort of the lift that you get from it, the feeling better, and start to say like, oh, wow, this thing that I do really doesn't contribute to this. You know, the fact that I don't really sleep more than 4 hours a night is probably bad for my anxiety. I don't actually know how this works. One of the ways that I think that it works is that nettles is an alterative, and it has a beneficial action on the metabolism. So it's actually a little bit stimulating to the part of your body that is deficient when you're in your stress response state. This is what I call speculative herbalism. It's the, I don't know, but I think, I've thought about it, and this is the story that I made up about it.
Is there another type of herbalism?
Yeah, right. So speculative herbalism is great, and we should all do it. It's like creative thinking. But I think that when you're uncertain about something, it's good to clarify that, you know? And when enough people have agreed to your uncertainty, you can say that it's a certainty.
So being high in protein, do you think that has something to do with that?
It probably helps. Although I don't know how much of the protein you're getting from the tincture. Sometimes I'll just like say like, wow, this person needs like some really, like they need green. They need some kind of like concentrated green. And there is like just a boatload of chlorophyll. Another question people have is like, well, should I drink the infusion or should I use the fresh tincture? And I think, well, why would you have to do one or the other, right? You can do both. It's like they do different things. The infusion is giving you a lot more of the nutritional content of the plant than the tincture is. The tincture is just doing something else. I think it's acting on that autonomic nervous system speculatively and helpful. But using both together is better than just using one or the other, in my opinion. So one of the things that I think about is, you know how nettles gives you that prickly feeling? Like to me, this is more speculation here, to me it seems like it's not just acting like creating an itchy rash and bringing circulation to the area, but it's actually acting on the nervous system because you're getting that pins and needles feeling. So one of the first times someone let me like sting the hell out of him with nettles was this big guy, you know, bare constitution, and he was riding a bike at this at the Woodward Dream Cruise, which is basically where Woodward is the main drag, one of the main drags that goes from downtown Detroit all the way out, like really, really far. Through the suburbs and all the sprawl. And the Woodward Dream Cruise, when people in old fancy cars basically make it impossible to travel from one side of Woodward to the other. Other people say it's a car show, but I think it's actually just a blockade with fancy cars. And he was riding his bike and someone walked out in front of him. He hit his handlebar brakes and he flipped over and he landed on his face and he chipped one of his vertebrae. And you know, they said that he bruised his spinal cord. But one of the things that he had was numbness on the inside of this arm and the inside of this finger. So my chiropractor told me that there's a specific set of nerves there, which is totally lined up and everything. And he did this in August. And in May, he was pretty much all better, but he still had that lack of sensation there. And I was doing an herb walk and I was talking this and he's like, oh, so I could sting myself with it? I'm like, yes, would you like to be the class experiment? And we stung the head of him. And he did it like 2 times. And then all of a sudden, he got sensation back, okay? So that's pretty cool. Do I know 100% for sure that it was the nettles? Of course I don't. But I do know, I mean, just thinking kind of deductively about it, like nothing was changing or shifting and then he did this. This was the only new thing that he did and he got sensation back. That doesn't mean that if you have lost feeling or sensation through a number of, like you're diabetic, right? You can't just sting yourself with nettles and your diabetes is gonna go away. Or like if you have a pinched nerve, which is like actively pinched, not like it got pinched and it's not pinched anymore, but it's kind of hurting. It's like actively compressed upon. You can't, it's not gonna work. I mean, that would be like fiddling with your hose nozzle, trying to get your hose to work and there's a car parked on top of the hose. Like, not gonna work like that. But have used it to stimulate nerve function. And I love analogies, and so I think about it like, you know, it's sort of like your car. You know, you get in your car and you turn the key and nothing happens, okay? Battery's dead. That's like numbness. Or maybe you get in your car and you turn the key and it goes like tick, 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 but it doesn't turn over. That's like tingly. And so what do? You find someone else with a car and you just jolt it with this electrical, you know, blast. And in my mind, which works in cartoons, the nettle is like the jump start. It just, the nerves are like, eek! And then they maybe help to start working better.
It's like
Yeah. So, to my knowledge, to my current understanding, if you're eating nettles, once they start flowering, it starts to get these crystals in it, which can then irritate tissues in the body, irritate the kidneys. And so they say once it starts flowering, you shouldn't gather it. I have gathered nettles and made tea out of them and made tinctures out of them farther into the season without any trouble at all. No one's reacted to them. Nettle seeds. So David Winston has introduced this idea that, from his experience, which is pretty surreal, of using nettle seed tincture to help restore kidney function. Okay, and I don't know of anything else that can do that, but he has cases, and I know of other people that have cases. And the first time I had an opportunity to do it, someone said like, oh, I got diagnosed with kidney failure. They say I need to go on dialysis, but I don't want to. And I'm like, do you want to try some of this stuff? And I'm all excited, right? Because other people's misfortune is like my learning experience. So I, gave him some tincture that I made, and, he said he's using it, and he said he's using it, and he said he's using it. And then I realized there's a common phenomenon occurring, okay? This is the phenomenon of either he's not using it, more likely, or he has one of those bottles that's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, because it just too much time went by, And so, selfish me, I'm thinking to myself like, I'm losing a learning opportunity because he's not following through. But people just do that. So, because I'm not rife with people with kidney failure calling me up, it was a while, but a friend of mine who's a naturopathic doctor in Detroit, she works at one of the hospitals north of Detroit, she says, oh, didn't you tell me about a plant that was good for kidney failure? And I was like, oh, well, there's nettle seed, but you can't just use this. Even, David's really strong on this. You can't just give someone nettle seed and then poof, they're better. You have to fit it into a formula that makes sense. And she says, well, I've got a formula, but I'd like to try that. And so she gave it to him, and boom, he got well enough that he didn't need to go on dialysis. Now, that doesn't mean that he went up to like 80%, but even just the stray chance that the nettle seed was the thing that helped him not go on dialysis, that is like an immense, immense thing to do for someone, okay? So you can say it is a tropho-restorative for the urinary tract, the kidneys, the renal system. And then the other use that nettles has become increasingly popular for is for like adrenal burnout. People have like crashed adrenals. And different people, the first time that I heard this presented was Henriette Kress, who said that she heard this story about this guy who, whenever he wanted to sell horses, he would feed the horses just boatloads of nettle seed, and they'd be like all like, like happy and going. And then, someone would buy them, and they would get home, and they'd be like, oh, I'm tired. Because they were really old horses, and they only had the nettle seeds for like a few days. And someone somewhere in Finland or Norway or one of those Scandinavian countries started saying like, oh, well, what if we put nettle seeds into the food at a assisted living center or retirement community or whatever the proper name for something, not old folks home, right? We want to say that. And they say put it in their food, and all the old people got nice and peppy and had a lot more energy. And they found that after they did that for a while, for like a duration of time, when the people retained a lot of the benefit that they got from it. So it's stimulating and restorative. Some people, if they try and use it like this, end up feeling like agitated by it, okay? So if you were to try nettle seed tincture or just gathering nettle seeds and putting them on your food or consuming them, mixed with honey, and then you felt like really agitated, that just means nettle seeds aren't for you, They're not inherently overstimulating. It just means it's not working with your system and the way that you react to something. But I've used nettle seed tincture and just given people nettle seeds when they've been burned out for a long time and they're sort of crashed. Like they're kind of at the bottoming out stage. Another thing that I'll use in those instances is ashwagandha. And this nettle seed would be a little bit more stimulating, ashwagandha would be a little bit more relaxing, but they both have a restorative action. And the differentiation that I would use for the fresh nettle tincture that I talked about and nettle seed tincture, just nettle seed, would be, I think, speculatively, that the fresh nettle tincture is working more on this autonomic switching, okay? That you're not just always, hyper reactive and, sensorily overstimulated because you're in the sympathetic state really more often than is good for you, whereas the seeds are more like helping with the actual structure and function of the adrenals themselves. Some people have suggested that they are nice stimulating aphrodisiacs. So I encourage lots of self-experimentation on that end. Seeds. So the other thing people use nettle for is the root. They use it for prostate issues. And unfortunately, I can't talk to that because I just don't get it. Like I've learned, so would you like, Seven Song, would you like to guest star here?
It's one of the best, not for prostate cancer, for the BPH. Hey, Jim.
Hi, Seven Song.
Oh.
So good to see you.
Oh my gosh. Hi, Mom. So I do a lot of work with men, and for BPH and for prostatitis. So not prostate cancer, which is a whole other milieu of health issues. Nettles root tea. Nettles root tea is much better than nettles root tincture, maybe twice as good. So, but nettles root tincture or tea, definitely they increase outflow of urine. Mm-hmm. Maybe even clear a little bit of glomerular filtration, GFR, glomerular filtration rate. In other words, they help the body clear a little bit more excess waste products from the bloodstream. But really gentle and really easy to use. If you have nettles and it's prolific around you, it's easy. You can gather the roots there. Actually, you go in for rhizomes, not roots. So when you gather them, they're going to grow. They're flat and bone colored. And they're not far below the surface. They're easy to gather. And usually, within a few years, your nettles patch will come back and you'll have plenty of roots again. But just cut them up, decoct them for about 10 or 15 minutes. Make a good strong decoction. Or tincture them. I tincture them fresh, 1 to 295%. And so BPH, prostatitis. BPH is even better. Prostatitis, you still have to kill the infection causing the prostatitis. So.
Yeah. So we can put like guest starring. Guest starring.
Yeah,
guest
who
starring.
needs a theme song?
I just want to say, Jim, that I agree with you. I use nettles often after they go to seed because I just need to gather it, and I find them pretty useful. Every once in a while, they look extra, and they're a little too much for the kidneys, too much filtration, so some people might get a little bit of lower. Without all that, I just think that nettles are good, most basically if they're green and lush.
Yes. And nettles too, kind of like the lemon balm. I said that, if you have lemon long, it's looking spent, right? Or nettles, you can grab the stem like this, put a stick down on it, and it'll start to grow new stems from along the old stem, and you'll get new growth, right? So if you have a stand, you go back and you're like, oh, I really want to get some, but my stand is all spent. It doesn't look really good. It looks like that. Just bend it down, wait a couple weeks, and then pick. You won't get, really tall plants like that, but you will get that new growth. And those actually are better for cooking too. So if you like eating your nettles, you would want to get the new growth in the leaves that look really nice and tender. Yeah, when I gather the seeds, I'll generally gather them when they're still a little bit green and not necessarily like this. But someone whose name I do not remember told me that they gather them when the seeds are fully ripe like this and they think that they work good like this. So I just don't have as much experience as I would need to say. But as herbalists, what we do is we hear stuff and we try it out, right? And that's the way you really find out whether stuff works. That's the way you can find out whether something is going to be irritating at a certain stage of growth. You can try it out. You just want to try it out like on yourself or your partner. If you have a solid, strong relationship. If your relationship isn't very solid and strong, trying it out on your partner might be problematic.